So, yep, 15 years of experience inside 20 minutes. A little bit of background. So when I was at school, I managed to realise that actually drawing is a lot of fun. So I could sit at the back and I could doodle away and I didn't have to bother with history or RE or maths. When I got to foundation, it was like, I don't even have to bother with maths at all now. I could do this all the time. This is a seminal piece of work about brushing my teeth. So university was amazing. I just basically got to drink for 3 years and I didn't have to worry about the real world at all. And I had hair, which was also good as well. So. And then post-university reality hit, which was a mundane life of, I was literally licking envelopes and I was writing on envelopes and using a thing to stick those envelopes down, and it was just better than just licking them, and doing data entry, and I realised that being an artist doesn't pay any bills. Life's full of remedial work, and at this point I realised I was actually going to have to work hard if I wanted to do something creative. So since then I've been listening to a lot of people. I think someone's trying to get in. Okay. I was listening to a lot of people, read a lot of books, been to a lot of conferences, and slowly, surely, I hope I know what I'm doing. And there's this theory about talks that actually what they are is you going back to a previous version of yourself and giving yourself advice. So I think this talk is probably me just sort of going back to that point and giving myself a series of bits of advice. So my first one is, don't shoot in the dark. Have a process. So what does this mean? Well, it's all about getting from here to here. It's all about going from A to B, which is a hell of a lot easier if you break it up into smaller steps. Now, as a web designer, my process might be something like this. So I'm going from discovery through to production, using workshops, research, prototypes, wireframes, concept boards, mood boards, initial designs, final designs. So why is this important? Well, you're avoiding that final, that big reveal. If you can involve a client at each of these steps, then you avoid that big reveal, which never really works. And it gives you confidence in each step. So if you're working in a team, you might be handing stuff over. You might be working with somebody else. And most important, I think, is to avoid this eureka moment. If you're doing this stuff every day, you can't rely on having these happen to you. You've got to find a process to get those ideas out. George Nelson puts it this way: you don't think your way to creative work, you work your way to creative thinking. Design really is a job, and you need that process to get those ideas out. So number two, if you can't explain that process, you don't know what you were doing. Now, I'm going to play a video, and apart from this guy being a bit of an idiot, I wonder if we can work out, what he's doing wrong. So he's a designer, and he's showing the other guy. He's trying to get some feedback from the other guy.
Okay, I'm just going to show you a few pictures, and you tell me which ones you like. Okay?
Okay, sure. Hold on, I thought you were going to show me pictures of boxes, like data storage devices.
Before I can actualize a box, you and I need to develop a shared aesthetic vocabulary. Otherwise, I have no idea what we're going to want.
I have a lot of work to do right now.
This is work. This is my work. What we're doing here could actually save time.
Okay, sure, yeah.
Let's just make this simple. If the box were an animal, what sort of animal would it be? Leopard? Butterfly? Rhinoceros?
Stop, animal. It's a box, right? Okay, so if you need an animal, make it a box turtle. How does that sound?
So maybe playing music and just throwing some visuals at someone's never going to work. But actually, I think if he'd taken his time to explain what he wanted out of that in easy to understand words for his client, he might have been a little bit more productive. But actually, it's more than just being able to explain it. If you can explain it, then you know your process. So why is this important? Well, I showed this previously, but actually it's quite nuanced. So you might change your process a little bit. You might skip bits, you might go back, you might go forward and skip a few at the same time. So it's different. Your process changes for each project. You have big projects, small projects, clients with a lot of money, clients with a little bit of money. And there's a human element to this as well. So some clients just naturally get this stuff and you can go through. Some don't, so they need a lot more hand-holding. So you need to know what you can get from each step. So number 3, be a creative sponge. Now, actually, I think this is probably one of the most important ones, and I think it goes across disciplines as well. I don't think this is just about being creative. So when I was at art school, we used to have to do these things, visual diaries, which was, we were encouraged to go out into the world, see something we like, copy it down, maybe take a photograph. But actually, I completely missed the point. It's not about collecting things that you happen to see. It's about looking in the first place. And further than that, it's about cataloging. So from a practical level, it's about going out into the world and seeing things, looking. If you go to Waterstones, take nice pictures of some books you've seen, a nice bit of typography on a ticket, little bits of advertising you might have seen on the way to work, or interesting looking buildings. If you see something, take it. A way to collect that is you could have your visual diaries, but they're going to get pretty big. So you could use something like Pinterest to collect all these things. But because I'm old school, I've been doing this for like 10 years, I've been using Flickr, which is a really useful way of keeping things in albums. So I've got like albums for icons, for logos, little clever messages, case studies I've seen, websites, and then in here little layout bits I've seen, little bits of animation, web components, borders, lists, headings, that sort of thing, routing. So and then in there, that's all my stuff that I've collected that I can then go and use. It's kind of interesting as well because I've been doing this for 10 years. So you can actually see where my interests change. You can see sometimes where responsive design came in and things like that. And I package these up every month, tweet them out. So if anyone's interested in them, just follow me on Twitter. So why do we do this? Well, George Bean says, things I've collected always have relevance at some point later. It's impossible to remember everything, but subconsciously it does sink in somewhere. And it helps you develop your taste. But actually the most important thing is it makes you look in the first place, which leads me nicely on to my next point. Steal it until you feel it. Okay, so there are better phrases than this you might have heard before. Fake it till you make it, everything is a remix, steal like an artist. But is it actually okay for people to steal? With Jonathan Lethem, instead of people who invent things, actually 9 times out of 10, they just don't know the original sources that were involved. Kobe Bryant, he initially stole his moves from his idols as he was growing up, but realized he didn't actually have the same body shape, so he had to adapt them to make them his own. On the web, we do have this, you literally can copy and paste. So where's the line? Well, might be a little bit surprising actually. At the beginning of a project, I'll often rinse my folder, grab out bits of things that I think are quite interesting or maybe relevant to something I'm doing and save them for later. So, is that stealing? I don't think so. I think the thing I'm creating at the end is so far removed that it becomes something else. It's almost impossible not to put your own spin on something. So this is a photorealistic painting by Chuck Close, and I've put Chuck Close in here just to show you the scale of this thing. It's really massive. It's so realistic because he literally got a photograph, gridded it up, then gridded his canvas up, and then meticulously copied across each square. It's almost like he became a computer, almost like a printer. It's almost like he took himself out of the process. But actually, he's still there. He chose to smoke that cigarette. He chose to wear those glasses on that day. He chose to have his moustache. But actually, even those marks he was making, they came from somewhere within. Only he could really have created that. So I think that by the time you brought those original ideas into a project, you've mixed it with your client's brief, and you've added your own creativity, it inevitably becomes something else. So why is this one important? Well, there's an argument that there are no new ideas. If everyone's had a client brief that says something along the lines of, this must be original, it's got to be different, that's like one of the worst things you can get. You know, it's so hard to do that, and you'll probably end up failing. This takes the pressure off actually creating something original. Well, why wouldn't you embrace it? If you just draw from your own head, you're only going to get what was in your head in the first place. It's a cheesy line, but stand on the shoulder of giants, use what has come before. Another good one, I think. Starter first, pudding later. So this is how I used to design back in the day. You know, I'd maybe move a logo over there, maybe move this underneath here, move that over there, maybe just nudge it over by 10 pixels. Oh no, I'm going to move that back. Whatever you do, do not get yourself into this sort of situation. You know, even if you've done all your research, don't do this. Don't just open up Photoshop or Sketch or whatever and just expect a design to come out. It won't. It's all back to this process. It's these manageable chunks, like a mood board or a star tile or something smaller, something that's sort of throwaway and it doesn't have to be 100% right. And this is where you can rinse that inspiration folder. And this is where you get to play. And if you're a designer, you get to play. It's great. Which leads nicely onto options. Options. Might have overdone that one, but not for the sake of it. Arthur Koestler says, the creative process consists in the discovery of hidden similarities. It's about that leap of the imagination. One idea bleeds into the next. But also, how do you know it's the right option unless you've explored all of those other options first? This shows how I think I used to design on the left, and this is how I design now. And as you can see, the one on the left takes this kind of very long, meandering path and it follows one option and it gets to the end. Whereas now I design in, you know, the branches are a lot smaller. You know, I'm able to explore all the options at once because they are smaller. So that's why you don't rush into this full design. You know, something like a mood board, hopefully, once you get it sorted, once you get that first one, you know, you can do that in an hour, hour and a half, and then you can do lots of different options. So just as a little example of that, this is for a client. They're a consultancy firm, and they're involved in the construction of temporary buildings that they have at the Olympics and things like that. And this is 4 examples of some style tiles. The top one was just based off some of the brand collateral that they already had. This one was after a conversation about them being a lot more vibrant. This one was because these guys actually deal with multi-million-pound projects, and they're actually, you know, it's a lot more corporate perhaps than it might first seem. But at the same time, they were talking about being friendly and approachable, and it's a real people business. Now, if we hadn't done this, we would have ended up with the first one. And that's okay, and it would have worked and it would have fitted in. But by being able to explore everything, we were able to show the client this one. So this was a lot more fun to produce, and actually, more importantly, it was actually just right for the client. So why is this one important? Well, I've discussed that ideas breed, but there is another really nice practical reason for this. So if you're showing your work, that can get quite nerve-wracking, especially if you've done something that's just a little bit out there. And if you turn up to a client and you go, this is a bit crazy, you know, it's quite nerve-wracking. So if you're able to make smaller options and involve them, you can have that safe option, do that safe option, it's in your back pocket, and then you can do all the playful ones as well. And it's so much less nerve-wracking if you know you've got that safe one to do all these playful ones. And as a designer, you've got to take these risks. So this just makes it a whole load less risky. Just as a bit of a side point, actually, when I was researching some of this, the Romans, their word for genius meant something along the lines of a guiding spirit. Like they literally believed that this spirit came into you, gave you some idea, and then left. Now, I'm not saying that's true, but it would take the pressure off. It'd be so great. You know, I had a really terrible day at the office today, but you know, my spirit wasn't around, so sorry. less is more. One of the reasons for that less is more is Hicks' law, which says that the time to respond increases with the number of alternative stimuli. So the more busy something is, the longer it takes people to make decisions. There's another reason as well, and to illustrate that, I want to play a little game of higher or lower. So I'm going to show you this one, and I want you to tell me if the next slide feels more expensive or less expensive. So more expensive, higher, less expensive, lower. It's a game of higher or lower. Okay, so is the next one more expensive, less expensive?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, oh, thank goodness. Great. Okay, so obviously there's other signifiers in here. You know, we've got the logos different. That one's got a big for sale sign in and stuff like that. But there is this relationship between the perceived value of something and how busy it is. So why is this one important? Well, because less really is more. It's your job as a designer to cut through, simplify everything down, and think of this. If you have a client that keeps wanting you to add things, you know, tell them this is really useful stuff. So less really is more until it's not enough. So it's not quite as simple as all of this, but I'm just going to move quickly on. Okay, number 8. You must understand brand guidelines. So there's a nice practical reason why they're guidelines and they're not rules. This graphic shows that the blue rectangles on the left are a lot lighter than the darker rectangles on the right. But once you take away the pink lines, move them together, they're actually just the same value, the same hue, the same RGB value. So if one colour is affected by another colour, how can there be one RGB value? You know, when you open up a brand guideline, it says this is the value. That value is different. So it's up to you as a designer to know all these things. And there's loads of practical reasons for this sort of thing. So quite often a brand guideline will have been created by print designers, and they'll have maybe the classic example really is that they'll create this logo and it's like really complicated and it's like this way around and it's got the tagline underneath, and it's not going to look particularly great on desktop, and when you get to mobile you ain't going to be able to see any of it. So a lot of brand guidelines have to be expanded into a digital space. But I think what you need to know is the intention behind a brand guideline, which is to create consistency and familiarity. So a customer that sees something that's inconsistent, an inconsistent brand asset, it actually starts to weaken that brand. So if you see something that looks a bit shit to you, unless you really know what you're doing, don't change it. Quite often it's actually better to have something that looks a bit crap everywhere than to have this one bit in the corner of the web that you happen to feel looks better. However, this is actually where it gets quite interesting. So, I've spoken about this, brand consistency, but if we stick meticulously to those brand guidelines, how as a designer are you going to get involved in that conversation to push things forward? Where's the innovation? If you're just given these things and you've got to stick to them, where's that next big idea? So maybe instead of brand consistency, it's actually more about brand coherence. So brand consistency is an unchanging and repetitive brand. Brand coherence is still familiar, it's still intuitive, but it allows for change over time. When you understand what a brand guideline is, you know where the holes are and you know where they can be pushed. A good brand guideline should delve into all this framework stuff, which is really boring looking most of the time. But actually, there's often some really good nuggets in there, and you have to understand them, all these cheesy pillars and donuts and things like that. It's this that actually allows you to understand the brand, create something that's consistent and familiar. It's this that allows you to push things forward and find that next exciting big idea. So we're at Bytes, so it's a bit of a given, really, but I just wanted to finish on a really nice quote. Mostly, the secret to being good at anything is to approach it like a curious idiot rather than a know-it-all genius. Why? Excuse the horrible picture of some stale bread, but nobody likes to go stale. There's always new things to learn, and you're never finished. So these were the things I wanted to tell myself 15 years ago. I'm excited about what I'm going to learn over the next 15 years and be able to tell myself then. Thank you very much.